Governor Hochul thought she was safe, until Stefanik delivered that line at the campaign launch. What she said to Mamdani would create a complete political earthquake. The Hudson Valley campaign event was supposed to be just another routine election rally. Kathy Hochul would make her standard speech to supporters about protecting her governor's seat, get applause, take photos, and everyone would go home. But that evening, Elise Stefanik's unexpected participation changed everything. It was exactly 7:42 p.m. Hochul had already taken the stage and was halfway through her speech. She was listing her promises about affordability, explaining how New York would become more suitable for working families. The crowd was responding positively. Everything was going according to plan, until Stefanik slowly began walking from the back of the hall toward the stage. The moment Hochul spotted Stefanik, she paused. Holding her microphone, she seemed to hear only her own breathing in the hall's silence. That familiar expression on Stefanik's face. This wasn't a friendly visit. This was time for a reckoning. "Ah, Representative Stefanik," said Hochul, her voice carrying both surprise and cautious courtesy. "Welcome. I don't think you were planning to be with us today." Stefanik approached the stage but didn't climb onto it. She positioned herself where the crowd could see her clearly. Hands at her sides, calm but determined posture. "No, Governor Hochul." "I wasn't planning to, but sometimes life requires us to change our plans." The hall was now completely silent. Nearly 400 people held their breath. No one knew what would happen, but everyone could sense something was approaching. Hochul's campaign team was frantically whispering beside the stage, trying to figure out how to control the situation. "Well," said Hochul, gripping her microphone tightly, "so you have something to say?" "Actually, yes." Stefanik's voice was clear and strong, audible throughout the hall even without a microphone. "I have things to say particularly about affordability." A slight smile appeared on Hochul's face, but her eyes showed unease. "Of course, Representative. Affordability is a common concern for all of us." "Really?" Stefanik stepped forward. "Because there seem to be quite significant differences between your definition of affordability and mine." Restless movement began in the crowd. This was no longer a courtesy display. This was a political clash happening live. Hochul's advisors were in panic mode beside the stage, but they knew intervening would create an even bigger scandal. "Representative Stefanik," said Hochul, her voice now carrying a harder tone, "if you have policies you want to criticize, we can discuss them on appropriate platforms." Today here," Stefanik cut her off. "You're standing before the people of New York making affordability promises. But I'm really curious, Governor Hochul, how much has the average family's rent increased under your administration?" Hochul froze. This wasn't one of the questions she was prepared for. "Representative, there are numerous factors in this." "A simple question, Governor Hochul. What's the number?" "Multiple factors contribute to this increase." "The number, Governor Hochul." "Just the number." The hall was frozen solid. As Hochul switched her microphone, her hands trembled slightly, her eyes darting left and right as she tried to find the right answer. "Of course, economic data." 23%, Stefanik said coldly. 23% in the last 2 years. The average family's monthly rent went from $2,400 to $2,950. "Is this your affordability vision?" Whispers began in the crowd. Even Hochul's supporters seemed disturbed by these numbers. The governor was trying to regain control. "Representative, the housing crisis is a national issue and our responsibility," Stefanik cut her off again, "is to provide realistic solutions to New Yorkers, not unreachable promises." And then, exactly at that moment, the unexpected happened. A man stood up from the front of the hall. Middle-aged, suited, confident-looking. Hochul's campaign team seemed to recognize him. "Excuse me," the man said loudly, "but what's being said here is completely one-sided," and Stefanik turned and looked at the man. "And who are you, sir?" "Rajesh Mamdani, Housing Policy Advisor to Governor Hochul." The hall fell silent again, but this time it was a different silence. This was the calm before the storm. A smile slowly appeared on Stefanik's face. That smile was visible from everywhere in the hall and wasn't friendly at all. "Ah, Dr. Mamdani," said Stefanik, her voice now carrying a completely different tone. "How timely." Mamdani noticed the change in Stefanik's tone but didn't back down. "Representative Stefanik, by taking statistics out of context." "Context?" Stefanik maintained her smile. Dr. Mamdani, speaking of context, shall we discuss what you said at last month's Columbia University conference? Mamdani's face suddenly changed. His confident demeanor vanished. Which conference do you mean? The Urban Planning Institute meeting. October 15th, what did you say there? How did you describe middle-income families' housing expectations? The hall was now breathing audibly. Hochul's campaign team was in full panic mode. This was turning into an unplanned interrogation. Mamdani cleared his throat. Academic discussions made in academic contexts. Unrealistic expectations. You used that term, didn't you, Dr. Mamdani? Stefanik's voice was now ice cold. You described the dream of homeownership in Manhattan for middle-income families as unrealistic expectations. This is taken out of context. And then what did you say? For this demographic group, the priority should be rental, not ownership. Is that correct, Dr. Mamdani? Mamdani remained silent. Hochul tried to intervene. Representative Stefanik, Dr. Mamdani's academic work. Wait a minute, Governor Hochul. Stefanik raised her hand. I'm not finished yet. Dr. Mamdani, do you also remember what else you said at that same conference? Mamdani was now completely on the defensive. Representative, if these conversations are taken out of context. Reality of rental instead of the illusion of ownership. Those were also your words, weren't they? And the best part, the American dream must be geographically redefined. Valid for Queens and the Bronx, not for Manhattan. Astonished murmurs rose from the crowd. Even Hochul's supporters were reacting to these words. Stefanik paused and surveyed the entire hall. So, said Stefanik slowly, Governor Hochul's affordability vision, from her advisor's mouth, means middle-income families giving up their ownership expectations. Is this your solution? Hochul was now completely cornered. Representative Dr. Mamdani's personal views. Governor Hochul, Dr. Mamdani is your official advisor. He shapes your housing policies. If his views are personal, who's determining your policies? And right at that moment, the most unexpected thing happened. A woman stood up from the back of the hall and shouted, I was born in Manhattan. I've lived here for 35 years. Can someone explain to me why I can't be a homeowner? Then other voices rose. Where will our children live? Are we forced to Queens? What does this mean? The crowd was starting to become uncontrollable. Hochul's campaign team rushed to the stage trying to intervene. But Stefanik wasn't finished yet, Dr. Mamdani, said Stefanik, making her voice heard despite the crowd's noise. One last question. Where do you live? This is a personal but Upper West Side apartment, worth $3.2 million. Correct, Dr. Mamdani? Silence. Complete silence. So, Stefanik continued, the man who says unrealistic expectations for middle-income families lives in a $3 million apartment himself and gives housing policy advice to Governor Hochul. Hochul now turned off her microphone and began talking with her team at the stage edge. But Stefanik was finished. Dear New Yorkers, said Stefanik, now addressing the crowd directly, affordability isn't just a slogan. It's a real need. And if your leaders are offering compromise-based solutions on this matter, perhaps it's time for new leaders. Stefanik turned and began leaving the hall. Behind her, she left complete chaos. Hochul returned to the stage, tried to regain control, but the crowd was no longer listening. Everyone was watching Mamdani, waiting for his answers. But Mamdani had only bowed his head and quietly left the stage. That night, Stefanik's intervention went viral on social media. The hashtag #AffordabilityReality became trending. Hochul's campaign team tried damage control, but the damage had already been done. But the real shock came the next morning. Mamdani resigned. He published a letter announcing his departure from Hochul's campaign. The letter mentioned different visions and misunderstandings. But everyone knew the truth. In just 15 minutes, Stefanik had both questioned Hochul's affordability promises and forced her closest advisor to resign. And she had done this with completely prepared data and questions. The event planned as a campaign launch had turned into a nightmare for Hochul and a perfect political success for Stefanik. And New York politics would never be the same again. Because that night everyone learned that the prepared one always wins. And no one was more prepared than Stefanik. The ripple effects began immediately. Within hours, local news stations were replaying the exchange. Social media exploded with clips of Stefanik's methodical dismantling of both Hochul's talking points and Mamdani's credibility. Affordability reality trended not just in New York, but nationally. Political analysts scrambled to understand what they had just witnessed. This wasn't typical campaign rhetoric or partisan sparring. This was surgical precision applied to policy discussion. Stefanik had come armed with specific data, exact quotes, and strategic timing that transformed what should have been Hochul's safe space into hostile territory. Representative Stefanik demonstrated textbook opposition research execution, explained Dr. Sarah Chen, a political science professor at NYU, in an emergency panel discussion on NY1. She didn't rely on general talking points or partisan attacks. She had receipts, specific numbers, direct quotes, verifiable facts, and she deployed them at the exact moment when maximum damage could be inflicted. But the real political earthquake came in the following 48 hours. Mamdani's resignation letter, released at 6:47 a.m. the next morning, was carefully crafted but couldn't hide the reality of his position becoming untenable. After careful consideration of my role and the evolving nature of public discourse around housing policy, the letter read, I believe it's time for me to step back and allow new perspectives to guide this critical work. The euphemistic language fooled no one. Political insiders understood immediately that Stefanik had created a situation where Mamdani's continued presence would be a constant reminder of the Columbia University comments. Every housing policy announcement, every affordability initiative would be viewed through the lens of his unrealistic expectations framework. Hochul's response was swift but defensive. A hastily arranged press conference at the state capitol attempted damage control. Dr. Mamdani's academic perspectives don't necessarily reflect the administration's policy positions, Hochul stated, reading carefully from prepared remarks. Our commitment to affordable housing remains unchanged and unwavering, but reporters weren't buying it. The first question came from Channel 7's political correspondent. Governor, if Dr. Mamdani's views don't reflect your administration's position, why was he your housing policy advisor for 2 years? Did you disagree with his recommendations during that entire period? Hochul's answer revealed the depth of the problem. Dr. Mamdani provided one perspective among many that inform our policy decisions. Housing policy is complex and requires multiple viewpoints. But Governor, pressed the Albany Times-Union State House reporter, Representative Stefanik quoted specific dollar amounts for rent increases and housing costs. Are those numbers accurate? And if they are, how do you reconcile them with your affordability messaging? The questions kept coming, each one forcing Hochul deeper into defensive territory. By the end of the 15-minute press conference, it was clear that Stefanik's ambush had fundamentally altered the political narrative around affordability in New York. The strategic brilliance of Stefanik's approach became even clearer in subsequent days. Opposition research later revealed that she had been tracking Mamdani's academic statements for months, waiting for the optimal moment to deploy them. The Columbia University conference wasn't randomly discovered. It was part of a comprehensive monitoring operation designed to identify vulnerabilities in the Hochul administration's policy apparatus. This is how professional political opposition works, explained former Democratic strategist James Morrison in a Washington Post analysis. Stefanik didn't stumble into this moment. She created it. She identified a policy advisor whose academic positions contradicted the administration's public messaging, documented those positions meticulously, and then engineered a public confrontation at maximum political cost. The timing was particularly devastating for Hochul. The campaign launch was supposed to demonstrate momentum and unity heading into the general election season. Instead, it became a case study in political vulnerability and poor staff vetting. Republican strategists immediately began incorporating the Stefanik model into their own opposition research protocols. She showed how to turn academic records into political weapons, noted GOP consultant Rebecca Torres in an interview with Politico. Every administration advisor who has ever spoken at a conference or written an academic paper is now a potential liability. The reverberations extended beyond New York state politics. National Democratic operatives quietly began conducting vulnerability assessments of their own policy advisors, recognizing that Stefanik had identified a new category of political risk. For Stefanik herself, the moment represented a masterclass in political timing and preparation. Her office reported that within 72 hours of the Hudson Valley confrontation, they received more than 3,000 messages of support from constituents across New York and beyond. Representative Stefanik demonstrated what happens when politicians come prepared with facts instead of talking points, wrote one supporter from Syracuse. She didn't shout or insult anyone. She just asked questions and demanded answers. That's what we want from our representatives. The strategic implications rippled through both parties. Democratic advisors began emphasizing the importance of comprehensive background reviews for all senior staff, while Republican operatives intensified their focus on academic and professional records of opposition team members. Stefanik changed the game, concluded political analyst Mark Stevens in his weekly newsletter. She showed how academic honesty can become political vulnerability when deployed strategically. Every policy advisor in America just became a potential target for opposition research. The Hudson Valley campaign launch that was supposed to showcase Hochul's electoral strength instead became a demonstration of how quickly political narratives can be disrupted by prepared opposition and strategic timing. For Stefanik, it represented the kind of political victory that builds reputations and intimidates future opponents. As the dust settled, one thing became clear. The woman who came prepared with numbers, quotes, and strategic timing had fundamentally altered the trajectory of New York state politics. And everyone else was left scrambling to catch up.